So thank you everyone for joining us. I'm excited to be here. If you're new to the channel, my name is Dr. Kelly Waltman, and I'm excited to be here with my guest today for this live session, Kamara Toffolo. She is a resume writer, LinkedIn consultant, job search strategist, all around guru in the land of helping you, prepare yourself and find a job. And so I'm really excited today to be talking with her about how we can harness all of that in our leadership and growth journey, our career journey. We don't want to just start out our career with one job, one resume, one cover letter, and we're not just going to sit there with that for the rest of our career journey. So to help us with our leadership growth, to help us grow in our careers, she's going to give us some tips and strategies on how to help us do that, how to harness those things and to be able to move on and continue to grow. And particularly, we're going to talk a little bit about how to do that in our current climate, because the game has changed at least a little bit. I'm guessing it has. So we're going to find out from her what ways it has and what we can do about it. So without further ado, welcome. Very excited to have you, Kamara.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for that lovely intro.
Yeah.
Guru.
Yes.
I was blushing over here.
Yeah.
I am not referred to that very often.
There you go.
I love that. Thank you.
Happy Friday. You could,
Happy Friday. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's, if there's anything more you want to share with the audience about kind of what you do, and want to tell us a little bit more about you?
Sure. Yeah. So your intro was very thorough, but I guess I can add. So yeah, my bread and butter really is the job search. So my clients come to me once they've really identified their target job. So I don't work with clients who are like, oh, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. They know exactly what they want. And so my job is to help them get from point A to point B. And we bring in writing their resume, writing their LinkedIn, and also job search strategy to help get them to that point. So
excellent.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, we have Nola saying hello. She's giving
us
Nola.
Glad you could join us.
Yes. Yeah. So in thinking about, on the most basic level, ways to think about advancing, your career, or maybe advancing your leadership roles, let's talk about some of the ways that people can do that. Some things they can take advantage of to help them, take those steps forward. So, in thinking about networking, are there some key ways that people can use networking to help that growth?
Yeah, for sure. So networking is a powerful tool. Networking is really, I think networking should be at the very foundation, should be kind of the pillar of any way you approach your career growth or your job search. Networking should be priority number one. Even as a resume writer, I still believe that networking is the most important thing. So from a networking perspective, and we talked about this a little bit as well during when I had you on my show as well, learning from people who are already leaders is really key. And so where in my world, in the job search world, the tool that comes in that case often are informational interviews. So I personally don't like the term informational interview, because it's not really an interview. It's more of a casual get to know you networking meeting. And it's just really an opportunity for you to learn from someone who has gone before you, whether that be in your target employer, target job, or someone who is already a leader in this case. So they can offer a lot of insights. If you can secure an informational interview, it's really useful stuff. So that's where I would prioritize networking strategy, is to really get those informational interviews.
That's a great piece of advice. And I don't know that I've heard that term before, but
oh yeah.
So yeah. I get what you're saying in terms of thought of it being an interview, but I like that as, certainly the concept I'm familiar with, but in terms of that terminology, that's something that's new for me. So I think, but that's a fantastic suggestion. So thank you for sharing
Oh,
that.
my pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah. What about LinkedIn? How can people take it, since I know that's one of your areas, how can people really take advantage of LinkedIn?
Yeah. So, in terms of growth and finding opportunities for yourself on LinkedIn, LinkedIn is where a lot of the networking can happen. When you are requesting informational interviews or networking meetings, using LinkedIn is a really great way to do so. You can, just as an example, like a tactic on LinkedIn is when you connect with someone on LinkedIn, you can actually personalize the connection message. Now, in the beginning, when LinkedIn introduced this, people were using it well. I've seen it devolve into, I'm just going to copy and paste a generic message that I send to everybody just so I can, check off 50 connection requests that I've sent today. We don't want to do that. That's transactional. Looks like, and just, it doesn't look like you're putting the effort in. So when you are sending those customized connection requests, you need to make it specific to the person to whom you want to connect with. So if there's something particularly unique about their work that you admire, that you would love to learn from them about a specific thing that they have done, or a piece of content that they posted where you'd like to ask them some questions or learn more, just to make it really specific. So that's a good way to get in touch with current leaders who can maybe give you an informational interview. And also, further to our conversation last week, there are courses that you can take on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn training, like you mentioned, as well as you could also check out Coursera. I just personally took a course on Coursera for free, which was actually through a real university. So that was nice.
Great.
And as you mentioned, Udemy is also a good area to tackle some professional development. And there's LinkedIn is just kind of, the way I like to see LinkedIn is it's kind of like your one-stop shop for everything job search related. So you can apply to jobs on there. You can network with people on there. You can research companies on there. You can really do most things that you need to do on LinkedIn. It's a great tool.
Yeah, it's a great point that it really is this, vast resource that really any facet of the of the job search growth,
Yes.
career growth, that you'll be able to somehow take advantage of something on LinkedIn to help in that area. So, and I appreciate you sharing a little bit of the etiquette, because I know, sometimes on LinkedIn we tend to get bombarded with messages that do seem kind of canned, or just seem like somebody's trying to sell you something, and or people just want to get as many connections as they can, and so there really is no true connection happening there. And I think particularly for those leaders that you really truly want to connect with, it is going to be important to make that truly a personal thing, and like you said, share really what you are hoping to learn from them, not just, hey, let's connect so it shows we're connected, or add a number. But I really see you as somebody that I admire and respect, and I'd love to learn from you. And it doesn't have to be a big commitment, I think. I think it's Timothy Ferris that he talks about ways to kind of list that, so that people know you want some kind of tidbit for them, or you want to connect with them, but you're not looking for them to be your full-time mentor necessarily.
Right. Yeah. Definitely giving them an out, or acknowledging that, you don't want much of their, or you don't need much of their time, or not asking for much of their time, is very helpful.
Yeah.
One thing I should also add, where I'm getting a lot of traction personally, and I've seen other people getting a lot of traction in terms of networking and learning from leaders, is Twitter. So Twitter feels like a low time commitment, although it's not, because it kind of sucks you in like any social media. But because tweets are so short, and you really need to be thoughtful about what you want to say, because you're limited on how much space you get, it's a really good quick hit type of way to get your knowledge out there, as well as network with other people. And I find that engagement on Twitter is much higher than on LinkedIn. So I would say now, you're more likely to get someone to accept your request for a quick chat if you approach them through Twitter.
Interesting.
Yeah, it feels it's hard to explain. It feels like a more authentic platform at the moment, and people speak more freely there. I think that's why on LinkedIn we feel confined to being professional, whatever that means in our world. And also LinkedIn has some funky algorithms that favor boring content. And so but on Twitter, that's not the case. Lots of
Right.
comedians hang out there, lots of creatives hang out there, and lots of leaders hang out there. So lots of C-suite folks that you might want to get in touch with.
Yeah, that's great advice. I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, that's one of the platforms I have not been as diligent about, cultivating as Twitter. I trying to get there, but so that's good to know. Like that's a good motivator to be a little more intentional about it and spend more time there. That's helpful information.
It is tough to get up to speed with Twitter. I loved it years ago when I was in a different career. Loved it, then fell out of love with it, then fell back in love and out of love again, and now I'm back in love with it. It takes a while to really understand, what is this thing, Twitter? 200 and it allows 200 and some odd characters now. What is this thing? Why do I have to be so brief? But once you get into it, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's great. Are there any other tools that you can think of along that line that can really help people as they're trying to look for opportunities, either to connect with other leaders, just to seek out those opportunities? Anything else?
For connecting with leaders, I would say this really kind of brings Twitter back into the fold. Is I would really recommend becoming a raving fan, basically, of the leaders who you admire. So hanging out on Twitter, retweeting their tweets, responding to their tweets, subtweeting them, whatever. I would definitely recommend engaging actively with them on Twitter. Because it's noticeable. I notice when people are retweeting my content. I really appreciate it, and I know other people do. So there's that. With LinkedIn, not so much a connection or connecting with leaders standpoint, but definitely if you have an interest in leadership, you want to move into leadership, and you have knowledge of leadership, make sure you share that on LinkedIn as well. And the great thing about LinkedIn recently is, well, not so recently, but a while back, they made activity visible. So if someone, say a recruiter, goes to your profile, wants to see what you've been up to recently, they can look at your activity, and in doing so, they can see, oh, hey, this person's been sharing content about leadership, or this person has been commenting on posts about leadership. So that's a way to kind of poise yourself or position yourself as a person on that leadership track as well.
That's great. How beneficial are the skills area within LinkedIn? You're able to say your proficiency with different skills. Are they helpful? What's the deal there?
Yeah. So it is useful. So the deal there is LinkedIn's always changing that section, but I'm glad you brought that up, because it's often a neglected section of our profiles. If you joined LinkedIn like back in the day, you would have uploaded a resume, and then LinkedIn would have gone through your resume and then picked out the information about you and categorized it. And so I've seen a lot of skills sections that make zero sense, because LinkedIn isn't that smart and didn't properly allocate skills, or didn't properly define skills. So it's really important that we all take a look at our skills list and audit it on occasion, to make sure it's properly reflecting our skills. So there's that. And from a keyword perspective, from a searchability perspective, that is a searchable section of LinkedIn. So it is important. Another aspect of that skills section is you have the ability to highlight your top 3 skills. And so I would really recommend moving your skills around so that you're highlighting the top 3 core skills that you want to be known for. Leadership, team leadership being probably one that's the most important if you're headed towards or headed on the leadership track. So I have a video on my channel about moving skills around and how to do it. And so I'd recommend everyone check that out. I think it's called, I don't know. There's just, it says skills, something about skills, and it has a LinkedIn logo in the thumbnail.
All right. I'll make sure I link to that when we, when I upload this later for the replay. I'll make sure that we link to that video.
Thanks.
Yes, I did fail to mention that your YouTube channel and how we know each other. And I did. I did not give a thorough introduction in the very beginning because yes, I failed to mention your fantastic YouTube channel. And so yes, definitely any videos that we mentioned throughout the course of this interview, I'll make sure are linked in the video description. But for sure, you should check out her YouTube channel because lots of great insight and strategies and the weekly office hours that you mentioned that I had the fortune of being on your channel last week. So yeah.
It was a great session. Yeah. Thank you.
So in thinking about, part of growing means that you're moving beyond. And so I think one of the tricky places people often find themselves is they want to step up to the next level, so to speak, of a position. But it can be tricky to do that, whether you're pursuing an internal promotion or looking for a job elsewhere that maybe is a bit beyond your current experience. How can people leverage the experience they do have, or how can people align themselves to make themselves a qualified candidate for a job that's kind of a step above where they currently are?
Mm-hmm. So it's really important to take stock of where you've already been. So to show we're qualified, we need to have already done something. And so having the aspirations to be a leader is not enough. Especially if you are applying externally. Perhaps you can kind of negotiate your way internally depending on your organization. But externally, if you're applying for another job, you have to show concrete examples of having done the work before you've done the work, if that makes sense, before you've had the title. So from a resume perspective, it's really important to highlight quasi leadership work. What isn't kind of formal or what one would expect from a leader, which is like actually leading a team. So in the absence of actually having led a team, things like being a mentor, it doesn't need to be formal, being a mentor to someone, training someone, again, doesn't need to be formal. Taking initiative on creating a new process that makes your team's life easier, championing or advocating for a new process or tool or system across your team to make the team more efficient. Maybe being part of a committee within your organization. Doesn't need to be related to your actual job either. But those are the types of ways that people are probably already exhibiting leadership skills. They just don't realize that it's leadership. It doesn't click as leadership. It's not obvious to most of us because we're too close to it. But with my clients, oftentimes they'll say, I have no leadership experience. Then we dig a little deeper and it's like, oh, you actually have quite a bit. We just need to bring that out on your resume. Right. And cover letter and LinkedIn. Right.
That's a great point. Yeah. So, thinking about that, I like the way you say that, you need to have on some level done the work, so if you're wanting a leadership position to lead a team that's doing the work you're currently doing. So you highlight the fact you have that experience in doing that actual work, and then look for those ways that you can show, informally that you've had a leadership role within that work experience, even if it wasn't an official title. So it's a really great piece of advice and a great strategy, because it does feel difficult, when you want to move to that next level and you feel like you're doing a really good job where you are, but you want to move on. We talked about that a little bit last week in our other interview, that, looking for those ways to informally lead and demonstrate your leadership experience. Are there, key phrases or ways that people should highlight that informal experience when they're trying to to highlight that on their resume?
Yeah, for sure. So I think on our resume, placement wise, we'll want to use like a couple bullets under, like 1 or 2 bullets under each role to highlight where you have exhibited leadership. Ideally, you would go back to your earliest role and do that with every single role, so that the reader can actually see a pattern of this. So you're really establishing yourself early as a leader in that way. So there's that. And then from a writing perspective, the verbs are everything. So led, championed, advocated, mentored, trained, things like that are leadership verbs or leadership adjacent verbs are really important. And then also you'll want to make sure that you highlight the positive outcome of that informal leadership work. So if we take, for example, that you trained a peer. So you trained a peer on some sort of software and enabling them to work, XX% more efficiently or something like that. If you mentored someone, mentored peer to earn promotion to blah, blah, blah role. If you built a process, there's a lot you can do with that. So proactively built blah, blah, blah process, increasing team's efficiency, however much percent, or saving however much money. There's a lot of different ways that you can exhibit this leadership and initiative in your resume.
That's great. Yeah, it just takes that time to really sit down and be intentional about thinking about it. So, being intentional about working on cultivating those skills and those opportunities while you're going through that process, but then also really thinking about it. And it's a great point to think that often we just need somebody to help us with that, that we need that fresh set of eyes and that fresh perspective to come in and say, okay, well, let's really take a look at this and dissect it, and let's see. And that fresh perspective can be huge. Because you're right, like we're so deep into our own experiences that we don't often think of them in that way. So
for sure, sure. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of reframing or the spin, although spin has a negative connotation. I'm a firm believer that truly anything can be reframed in a way that it showcases what you want it to showcase, while still being truthful, of course. So it's really, there's just a lot of opportunities or ways that you've probably already exhibited leadership. I think that's the most important message that I want to drive home, is that you've already probably done it. You just need to take a good hard look at what you've done.
Right.
And another point around what you've already done, you got to track what you do. Wherever you track it, whether it's a little notebook, whether it's in notes in your iPhone, whether it's on Google Docs, it doesn't matter where you're tracking all the great things you've done at work. You got to keep track of them. It needs to be a habit because I don't remember what I had for lunch yesterday. How am I going to remember how I nailed a project or mentored someone to do whatever 12 months ago? It's not going to come to my mind. So we need to track on an ongoing basis. And in doing so, that's going to be kind of the fodder for your resume or your promotion request. So it's well worth your while to build that habit.
Yeah, I completely agree. Not only in thinking about also when you come to annual, I'm not a big proponent of just having annual reviews. And I know they're kind of going out of vogue. It's definitely better to have that ongoing coaching and mentoring and review, but they still happen. The majority of workplaces still have the annual performance review. And so even if for nothing else than one, to make yourself feel good as a reminder, hey, I did all that. But also when you're coming into that review, that's a fantastic point to keep track of those things, because I've reached the age now where I know I won't remember. I used to fool myself and, try to tell myself, oh, I'll remember that. I now know, no, I won't remember that. And I've just accepted it and embraced it.
I've never remembered. So good for you. I've never remembered anything.
I didn't actually remember it either. I just told myself I would.
You told yourself, oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. No, I didn't actually remember it either, very rarely. So, it's a great point to keep track of those things, because it's so easy to forget. And, when time goes by, we have that recency effect, right? Like we only
definitely.
And so that's a great piece of advice. But also, as you're looking to grow and expand, that's going to be a huge resource to have.
Yeah. And one other thing that came to mind is having that kind of bank of awesome stuff that you've done will really help you be your own advocate in the workplace. You're not just going to get handed a promotion. The likelihood is very slim to none. So you need to be proactive, as we've already talked about, and you can't do this stuff in a vacuum. Like you need to advocate for yourself. You need to be like, here, look, this is what I did. And you need to talk to your manager, as we were discussing last week as well, is you really need to talk to your manager about how you see yourself growing and the ways you are contributing to your own professional development and growing into that leadership role. So you always got to advocate for yourself, whether it's internal or external. No one is going to sell you except you. So
yeah, that's absolutely right. I love, I read the book about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now, called How Women Rise. And, the author talks about that it's, obviously all stereotypes, there's people who don't fit, but that as a general rule, women tend to be a little bit less likely to speak up for their accomplishments, and they tend to be a little more humble and reserved and not really, and that's one of the things that I found, and I definitely fit that mold, where I tended not to, because I didn't want to sound like I was being boastful. But it is so important that you do advocate for yourself, and that you're not being boastful. You're just saying, look, I've accomplished this, and I deserve the recognition for that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Easier said than done. For sure.
Yes, it is.
It takes a shift for sure.
Yes.
Because I think, as you're saying, like, we're all kind of geared, most of us, I should say, are geared towards being modest, women especially. So you're so right. Like, we really need to stand up for ourselves, and it's not going to come across as boastful if you're showing facts. That's why that list is really important.
Right.
Just stating facts.
That's right. just stating facts.
Yep.
So, part of me hesitated to make this part of our conversation today, but at the same time, I know that it really is something that, it needs to be discussed and worthwhile. The dreaded global pandemic, COVID-19. What are you seeing in terms of, how has that impacted the job market, the job search process, recruiting? What's the landscape right now?
Yeah, the landscape is tense. Competition is very high. I did see some hopeful numbers, though, about the unemployment rates reducing, both in the US as well as Canada. So that's great. Or jobs were recreated or something. I can't remember the exact stat. In any case, this has really shifted things, but I don't think it's all bad. So COVID has really shifted the way we work, and the future of the way we work. We've, everyone knows, and has probably, this has probably affected them. We've mostly moved to remote work. Not mostly, but a lot of us have moved to remote work. And I see that this trend, or I predict this trend, will continue. It doesn't make a lot of sense for companies to rent office space that's going to remain empty, or only a little bit staffed. So that doesn't really make sense. Way cheaper to have people remote. And the same level of collaboration can happen remotely. We live in a great time. Honestly, this couldn't have happened at a better time because we have the tools.
Right.
So there's that. From a job search perspective, hiring is taking longer, generally speaking. There are some urgent, like we need people now in certain areas. So that will happen fast, but generally speaking, it's taking longer. And it's a little more complicated, and interviewing is happening by video mostly.
Right.
So I have a video interviewing on my channel as well. So that might be a valuable resource. Yeah, I just share some tips for interviewing over Zoom and Skype and things like that. So
That's great.
you got to be ready for those video interviews. As employees, as job seekers, we need to be proficient in the tech that will help us work with our colleagues. Zoom, of course, anything like Zoom that you may be required to use, like Google Suite, Slack, the different project management tools, possibly like Asana, Today or Monday.com rather, SharePoint, Microsoft Teams. We got to be proficient in that because I don't think many employers will want to train you on those basic tools. So you got to be ready to hit the ground running with those. Yeah, and then from a job seeking perspective as well, when we're following up on our interviews, following up on our applications, just exhibiting patience, demonstrating patience and empathy for the interviewer, for the hiring person, for the recruiter, that they are encountering their own difficulties, that the hiring process may be delayed, that can go a long way as well. So lots of different things that we can do to manage this for ourselves.
Yeah. That's lots of great points in there. And, particularly in thinking about being proficient in those technologies, I think, if you were already on staff somewhere and you had to be thrown into learning this stuff, that was one thing. But if you are coming on board, it's a great point that they're really going to expect you to understand how to do that, because they already have to train you as a part of the onboarding process. They don't want to have to train you on how to use Zoom as well.
Right.
And while you're job searching, that's a great time again to brush up on those skills. And as we've mentioned, you mentioned and I mentioned last week, there's tons of opportunities out there to learn these things for free.
Yes.
I would guarantee there's a YouTube video.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
Likely an official course somewhere. So yeah, it to be able to take the time to really brush up on those skills and at least have a basic understanding. Certainly people don't have to know things inside and out, but to be able to, upon hire, do the basic functions of your job. That's a great point.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, you're totally right. The great thing about tech tools is, like, as from a tech company's perspective, we want people to buy our tools. So it's in their best interest to put free training out there. They want people to buy and to use their tools.
Right.
And so it doesn't make sense for them to create barriers to that training.
Right. Yes.
And so, yes, you're totally right. Like anything, any technology, you'll find a YouTube video on it.
Yes.
And with things like Zoom or technologies where anyone can get access and you can get access for free, you can experiment as well. Like you could have a Zoom call with yourself. You could have a Zoom call with your mom. Like you can experiment, have fun with it. And yeah, there's a lot you can do just by like messing around in the tool itself.
Right. Have you seen, thinking about having this conversation made me think about this question. Are there, other skills that, when you think about skills that recruiters would be looking for leadership positions, I can ask that question more generally, like what skills would be beneficial, but have you seen, given that we're in, the state that we're in with this pandemic, has there been any research or anything that's come out that what they're looking for has changed, that there's a new set of skills, or maybe just other things that they're looking for leaders to bring to the table.
Right. The ability to lead remote teams is probably the most important. I haven't seen any particular stats or studies, but anecdotally, if you are a leader or you want to move in, if you are gunning for a leadership role, you have to exhibit that you can lead or have the ability to collaborate with a remote team. And that doesn't stop at the technology. Obviously, that's continued on to the actual leadership and the collaboration.
Right.
So that's why it's so important to have an idea of what you've done with your team and within the remote context, as well, within the remote context. So I'm trying to think of what else has come up. That's really the biggest. That's really, really the biggest. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And thinking just more generally, COVID-19 aside, but just more generally, as people are, and we've talked a little bit about this, but as they're developing their resume and their cover letter and getting ready to send that out, are there key skills or things that they really should make sure they highlight? I know you mentioned, having done the work before. Are there other key things that are helpful for them to highlight and include on their resume and cover letter?
Yeah, definitely. So we do want to try and hit some keywords around leadership on our resume, and I'll dig into cover letter in a little bit. But for resume, there are some keywords we want to hit: leadership, obviously, collaboration, possibly influence, and those are the main keywords that come to my mind. But we can't just include those keywords. We need to have concrete examples to back them up. That's where the tracking comes in, the tracking of the great things we've done at work, because let's say we have the keyword of leadership. So we have that keyword, then we look to our file, where have I exhibited that? And that goes into your resume. So there's that. And also, some companies, especially the really large ones and sometimes more traditional ones, might have a management trainee program or an invitation-only leadership development program that they offer to their employees. If that has ever been the case for someone, they definitely need to highlight that. And let's say it's invitation only leadership training, they need to highlight that they were invited to do this because they were identified as leadership, as a future leader, or someone that was poised or positioned or being groomed as a future leader, or part of the kind of succession plan at the company. So that's really important as well, because I think a lot of people have been invited for leadership training and they forget about it.
Right.
Like, go for training, yay,
right.
2 days off work or not at my desk and free lunch. And then after that, they just forget. And so making sure that you're highlighting that will also help, because that's social proof that you're seen as a leader. So you don't even need to say it yourself. Someone has already done it for you.
That's great.
So yeah, those are the main things that come to mind. Let's see. Yeah, those are the main things. And just always continue to be proactive, and on your resume identifying how you've been proactive in taking initiative for certain things, taking on a project, taking on rebuilding a process, influencing your team or beyond to adopt a new way of work, things like that. Cover letter. So cover letter is interesting because let's say we want to move into leadership, but we don't have leadership, like formal leadership experience. What I would recommend you do on your cover letter is kind of call out the fact that you aren't or you don't have a formal leadership background, but then back it up with, or kind of disprove their concerns and show them like, I may not have a traditional leadership background, but a few of the things that I've done to build my leadership skills have been this, this, and this. So that it's like, they'll read, oh, not a leader. Oh, but becoming a leader.
Right.
And so that's how I would approach the cover letter.
That's great. Yeah. And thinking, I'm guessing this is still the case, especially as, we use technology more and more. One of the things I remember hearing a couple of years ago is a lot of, especially larger companies, will use, resume scanning services, or, kind of these automated systems to filter out candidates, which, I know there's a lot of issues there anyway. But is it still, I guess the piece of advice I heard at that time was, as you are searching for a job, really look at the job description and try to match, or at least highlight in your resume and or cover letter, the things which I guess it would make sense to do that anyway, that they're looking for, but particularly with AI and doing the scanning, do you still see that a lot? Is that even really a thing? Or what, what's your perspective and experience on that?
Yeah, I have a very, very strong opinion on this. I'm glad you asked. Okay, so what you're referring to is the applicant tracking system, or the ATS, which is a tool that's intended to make recruiters and hiring managers and other people in talent acquisition, intended to make their lives easier. It's intended to make each application easy to track throughout the different touch points in the hiring process. So it is not as smart as certain thought leaders lead us to believe. And there's been a stat that has been going around for years and years and years, which has been disproven, in that 75% of applications are rejected without even being seen by human eyes. That is 100% incorrect.
Okay,
most applications are seen by a human. Otherwise, why do recruiters exist?
Right.
Like, they would do nothing.
Right.
Yeah, your applications are being seen by a human. But the advice that you were speaking to about including keywords and getting as close to the job posting as possible, that is strong advice. And very accurate advice, or like good advice. But it's not so much to match it or to comply with this system. It's more so to show you're qualified, and to show or to really help the reader understand you're fit for this role. We always, when we're writing resumes, we always want to bring it back to the human reader. We want to consider the human reader above all else, because humans make hiring decisions. And it's a human looking at your resume and deciding, oh, is this person getting an interview or not? I'm actually making a video on the applicant tracking system, and I'm going to debunk a bunch of myths. It's going to come out on Tuesday morning. So
I didn't even know that. Look at that.
Yeah,
Serendipity.
Very good. Yeah. Very good. It's your intuition.
Yes.
It's your intuition.
Good synergy there.
Yes. Yes.
So, is it reasonable to say then that people can expect to have multiple versions of their resume? Like, I think we have this tendency to think like, I'm going to write my resume and then it is what it is. But is it reasonable to expect that you might have to tweak it a little bit, not necessarily all the time, but as you're looking for different opportunities?
Yeah. So first, what's important is for people to identify what they're going after. What is their target job? Once they've got that nailed down, the resume part comes more easily. Okay. I never recommend writing a resume until you've got that figured out. Now, it doesn't have to be your dream job. It doesn't have to be your forever job. It could be a bridge job. It could be just something to make ends meet, but you got to know what it is. So once you know what it is, then you can write your resume. And so you shouldn't have a situation where you have multiple versions of a resume per se, but to your point, you should be making small tweaks to customize it to the target or to the job to which you're applying, and further to what you mentioned before, get it close to that job description that you're going after. So not wildly different resumes, but but certain sections can be tweaked. Like my recommendation is to tweak the title of your resume, possibly the opening paragraph if you need to stress something specific, as well as your skills section. Those are what you should tackle first.
Right.
For those customizing situations.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. So what I just realized I forgot to look at the question here. So Nola posed a question a little while ago. What if your manager isn't on your side? And I think she asked this when, we were talking about advocating for yourself and keeping your file. So what if your manager isn't on your side, was her question.
Right. So in my opinion, you continue with your tracking your file in your file, because that's going to help you get out of a place where a manager doesn't support you. I hope that the manager isn't so childish that they would try and sabotage your growth in leadership. That's my hope. That may not be the case. If that happens, then I would say start to do things a little more quietly, or look for a mentor outside of your team, and look for opportunities outside of your company to grow your leadership skills. I think we talked about this last week, volunteering. One of the greatest ways to show that your leader is sitting on a board. And there's so many organizations that are looking for board members, like so many small nonprofits. And as long as it's a cause you're passionate about, that's a really great opportunity to showcase leadership. Taking the professional development courses, as we've already talked about. So doing the growth or growing outside the context of your current role, or outside the context of your company. That's what my recommendation would be.
Yeah. So we have a comment from Jude that says, "Thank you for dealing with such a touchy subject. Great recommendations." So
thanks, Jude.
Yeah. And I agree. That is a great recommendation. Like, we talked about last week, that need to continue to advocate for yourself. And I think your point about the documentation is a fantastic recommendation and spot on, because again, like you said, you're just showing the facts, just showing the evidence. And so if they are going to continue to be difficult, even as you're demonstrating all of this, like you said, either looking elsewhere and or looking for those channels maybe that you can respectfully advocate for yourself within your company, understanding that dynamics are different everywhere. But yeah, it's a great point. That's why I say documentation is key.
Yes.
in all
every
ways,
context, in every situation.
Context,
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Document. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. So what are, thinking about both as people are pursuing leadership positions and growth, but also just kind of generally, what are your top, let's start with the don'ts. We'll start with the don'ts and then we'll go to the do's. Yeah.
Okay. So further to our conversation around the applicant tracking system, my biggest don't right now is to worry more about the applicant tracking system than the human reader when writing your resume. You really want to think of the human reader first, prioritize them, and always be mindful of them and how they want to read your resume when you're writing it. So that's really, really important. From a technical standpoint, like if we want to talk about the applicant tracking system and playing within its limitations, there are a couple things that we want to avoid, and that's using text boxes, putting any content in the header or the footer of a Word document. To access the header and footer, you need to double click at the top or double click at the very bottom. We don't want to use those sections that open up when we do that. We want to keep everything in the body of the document. So it can't, because the ATS can't read text boxes, and also can't read images, among a couple other things. But when I say can't read, it just means the content in using those types of tools will come up as blank. It's not going to reject your resume. It's not going to spit it back out. So don't worry about any of that, but ideally don't use those tools, because important information could not be passed to the human. So there's that. Another major don't for resumes is to avoid overusing bullets. So I call it bullet barf when you put everything in a bullet. So the purpose of bullets in a resume are to highlight important things, highlight your accomplishments most specifically, and your results and your positive outcomes. So highlighting those, when you put everything in a bullet, that effectively highlights nothing.
Right.
And so it's like highlighting an entire page of a textbook. That's the best analogy I can give that. So avoiding bullet barf. When we use a resume that is really focused on responsibilities rather than results, you don't need your resume to be a regurgitation of your job description. In fact, you really don't want it to be. You want to really, really highlight accomplishments, the things that stand out from the work you've done, the results you've created. And then the last don't that I want to mention today is we really don't want to use what's called a functional resume. A functional resume looks like the first page of the resume is like large chunks of bullets where we might put accomplishments for a particular skill. So we're categorizing under skills and then just listing our roles. We want to avoid that as much as possible. We want to go for a chronological resume where we allocate accomplishments under the job in which they happened. That makes sure that not only the structure is playing well with the applicant tracking system software, but is what a human reader would expect. Functional resumes are very hard to digest quickly, and we need it to be digestible quickly. So those are my main don'ts.
Yeah, that makes sense, because if, they have to spend a lot of time and energy just trying to understand your resume, they're likely just going to move on to the next one.
You bet.
Yeah.
You betcha.
Yeah. I know I would.
Yep. Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, that's a great point. So what are your top do's? What are your top recommendations?
Yeah. So top do's, we've already talked about the importance of identifying your target job. So we know that. We want to make sure that we study job postings from our target role, and that will help us identify keywords to integrate into our resume. So it's really important to have a good idea of what an employer would expect from us in that role. You also want to make sure that there's so many do's. I'm trying to nail down which one is the most important. So really, really focus on the content, focus on the writing of your resume. So as long as we keep a simple structure for our resume, we're going to be safe. But we need to make sure that we spend and devote most of our time and energy to the actual writing of the content. And we really need to make sure that content is marketing ourselves, so to speak, towards that target role. So there's that. Like minor do's for a resume is this is more framed as a don't, but try and avoid serif fonts like Times New Roman, and instead use sans serif font, so like Arial, Calibri, Verdana, things like that. It's easier to read digitally than a Times New Roman, which would be easier if printed.
Makes sense.
So we want to do that. Also, a sans serif font gives a fresher look and feel to our resume. We want our resume to look modern.
That sounds so like fancy when you say it. Like, it would sound much less lovely coming from me. I would say like sans serif, like just, kind of like my Northern Pennsylvania drawing out the A's that I do. So yes, but it sounds lovely when you say it.
Oh, thank you. I don't even know if it's French, but the song is,
sounds,
French.
Yeah.
Thanks. But serif, I'm probably mispronouncing that. In any case, so yeah, making sure that we go for a modern look and feel. We want to. This is another don't actually, but more of a do. we don't want to chop what we might think is irrelevant job experience or work experience just for the sake of relevancy. We really want to make sure that we're reframing things, we're shifting things, because I can guarantee that any job you did, you can link it as relevant to the job you want to do. I can guarantee it. It's just going to take some work and reflecting and reframing. So don't just cut information because you're going to create probably a career gap for yourself, which we want to avoid. A do regarding career gaps, let's say you were unemployed for a period of time, that needs to be addressed as well. You need to just put a simple one-liner, and I have another video on how to deal with that, especially for the time we're in now with being laid off or furloughed due to COVID. Right. We got to address it because I think I tell the story in the video, but one of my recruiter friends had a client ask him, why was this potential employee or candidate, why were they unemployed from March until now? Hello. So unfortunately, we need to spell it out.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's not, I guess the thing is it's not part of that guy's,
right.
manager's reality because they're still employed, right?
Yes.
So,
yeah.
We got to spell it out.
Yeah.
And same goes for if we took time off to raise kids, took time off to return to school, took time off to care for a sick loved one, took time off to care for ourselves. We need to explain the gap while still honoring our own confidentiality. And I get into that in that video. So
that's great. Yeah, I'll make sure I link to that as well. Yeah. Jude says, bien, which, you know, I would be more in the Spanish realm, but I don't know that I can pronounce French very well. Yeah. So any other, words of wisdom or anything else that you'd like to share?
Just maybe some words of hope. Hiring is happening. Just really stay the course. It feels like such an uncertain time, and it's uncertain for employees, it's uncertain for employers, but stay the course. You will be hired. It's just going to take a little more time than it would have in a non-COVID world. So just really stay committed to yourself, invest in yourself, and you will land somewhere, and ideally you will land somewhere where you can grow further into a leadership position if that's the path you're choosing. Right. So just stay committed. It'll work out.
That's great. I love that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Well, I will make sure in the video description that I link to, your website and these videos, but why don't you go ahead and just tell folks where they can find you?
Sure. So you can find me almost everywhere as Kamara Toffolo, KAMARATOFFOLO. So I am most active on Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram would be the last one. I am not on Facebook. Got to be specific about that one. Drop Facebook.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people are.
Yeah, I created a dummy account just for Marketplace, but that's it.
Yeah.
So I don't do anything on Facebook. If someone reaches out to me there, I'm not replying because I don't look.
Yeah. Yep.
So do you still have your Facebook?
I do.
Yeah.
Mostly, I do have the professional account. I maintain a personal one mostly because of just family and running. Yeah. So that's the main reason, but yeah, I still have one. But also it's hard to keep up with all of them. It's not just enough to just have an account.
Yep.
So, I think it makes sense to balance the platforms that resonate the most and work the best for what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. I most of the people I know are on Facebook. I would say that I'm an outlier in getting rid of it. For me, it was just a negative space.
Yeah.
Just got rid of it. And I stopped it was easy to let go of that habit, I'll say. Because I used to look at it like 12 times a day, but now I don't even think to look at it. So,
right.
Yeah. But yeah.
Well, Kamara, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. Was a
you.
great conversation. I think people are going to have a lot of really great information to help them as they, again, look to grow as leaders, look at their career growth, job search, all of it. Yeah, so thank you so much. Really
Thank you for having me. It was a great chat.
Yeah.
An hour flew by.
Yeah, it sure did. It sure did. And thank you to the viewers and for their questions and comments. Much appreciated. Yeah, we'll see everybody next time.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.